So, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whichever one it is for you. Welcome to Hempsall's Putting Into Practice podcast. This is part of our Business Map series. I'm Joe Pringle and I'm joined by Catherine Wrench. Do you want to introduce yourself, Catherine?
Hi, I'm Catherine Wrench. I'm a director of the Out of School Alliance, which I set up with my business partner in 2009. I have run out of school clubs myself, and I'm based in Cambridge.
Super, thank you, and thank you for donating or giving us your time this afternoon. We know from working with having 25 years of experience, that actually managing early years childcare out of school, childminding, whether it be big or small, is a complex task that providers all the time are balancing quality, health and safety with parents and children's needs, finances and business sustainability. DFE funded Hempsall to deliver a national webinar for all types of early years childcare providers in January 2021. We were asked to share our business support approach, some new tools and resources, as well as highlighting all the support that already exists out there for providers of all sorts. The webinar outlined the steps you could take to business plan now, for the summer term and across 2021. The content was structured around the 6-step process, a process that is aimed to assist anyone thinking about all the necessary and sometimes difficult business decisions that are needed to support business change and sustainability. The Business Map, the Business Map webinar, the other vodcasts that are part of this series are all available via the links on the Foundation Years website. Today, we're going to specifically think about out of school and wraparound care for early years and school-aged children. There were many out of school providers on the webinar, and there were some emerging themes and feedback that we wanted to chat with Catherine about to explore a bit further. So I suppose a good place to start is tell us a little bit more about the Out of School Alliance, who you are, what do you do, membership base, etc.
Okay. Well, I set up an out of school club in 2008, and at that time I had very young children, so I was trawling the internet in the early hours, trying to find all the information that was specific to the out of school club sector. And I could find a lot of information that was specific to nurseries and childminders, often centralised. But for out of school clubs, the information was disseminated all over the place. So having collated the information for myself, I realised that I couldn't be the only person in that situation looking for things and not being able to find it. So over coffee with Claire, who has a background in web design, we discussed whether it was possible to actually set something up so all the information could be accessed at any time of day or night and in one place. So that was the basis of setting up the Out of School Alliance. When we did it, we decided that what we wanted was a bottom-up solution for out of school clubs. So instead of telling them what they had to achieve, we wanted to explain what clubs needed to do in order to achieve things. So we provide information about how to set up and run an out of school club, what you need to do to meet the regulatory requirements. We provide template documentation and help and support for clubs with ongoing issues. In addition to that, we provide regular newsletters to keep our members up to date with the world of out of school childcare and any other regulatory changes that impact how they run a club, things like minimum wage and holiday pay and things like that. More recently, as a result of the pandemic, we found ourselves involved in lobbying the government to provide more information and in a more timely manner and support for out of school clubs. Our membership base is mostly in England because it's the Ofsted regulatory framework that we follow, but we do have members throughout the UK. And on the whole, our members provide out of school childcare or holiday club care. And that includes school run clubs, charities, privately owned clubs, some of whom have just one setting, some will have a handful, and others run chains of 50 plus clubs. So we cover the complete spectrum of out of school club providers. And in addition to this, we have a significant number of members who provide out of school activity clubs, so drama or taekwondo, that kind of a thing. And obviously they're not regulated by Ofsted, but our membership represents about 5,000 clubs.
Excellent, blimey. So I know that you do regular surveys with your members, and I know that over the last 12 months that you've done a number of surveys. What are your members telling you? What have they been telling you, and where are we at this current moment?
We're in a pretty desperate state at the moment. Many clubs tried to open during the first lockdown to provide care for the children of key workers and for vulnerable children. And they did so often running at a loss because it seemed like the right thing to do. Other clubs had a 6-month period almost where they were closed with no income at all. We're aware that during this lockdown, far fewer clubs have been able to open at all because they obviously worked through their reserves during the last lockdown, and in order to be at all sustainable for the future, they just can't afford to do it again. We're aware that a lot of clubs are being forced to close permanently. They've just worked through any financial reserves they had and have no resilience left at all. So, and it's becoming more and more desperate. I think the picture across the country is very patchy. Some areas demand has remained at a similar or pre-lockdown level, whereas others where working practices have changed for parents, or where parents have lost their jobs, then they're seeing occupancy levels way down, sort of 50% of what they were pre-lockdown. And that's without taking into account this latest lockdown and the impact that's having on clubs. In addition to this, for the majority of clubs, the only financial support they've got through the entire period of the pandemic has been from the furlough scheme. So they've had no financial support to cover ongoing costs like rent, training, insurance, and other professional services. So in the latest survey we did in November, 92% of the respondents said their occupancy levels were down on the previous year, and 36% said their occupancy levels were below half of the previous year. And the other really distressing thing was 48% said they were operating at a loss. And obviously this isn't sustainable. As I said, we're aware clubs are closing. It's at an unprecedented level. And the longer this situation continues, the more clubs are likely to be forced to close permanently. In the past, we've experienced a degree of churn with our membership, but at the moment we're experiencing something we've never had before, and that's clubs writing to tell us that they're not renewing, not because they don't want to, but because they've had to close their clubs. And we've been running for 11 years and we've never had anything like that before. And I know, we've seen the response to, or the government response to, the petition for financial support for childcare providers, and particularly for wraparound childcare. And, their response has been pretty much the same as always, with saying that there are a number of financial measures in place to support businesses during the pandemic. But each time they fail to address the unique nature of out of school clubs.
The nature of out of schools and some of the themes that came out from the webinar were very much around the operational, the holiday, especially those holiday only, the fact that they are very, very different. You know,
Yeah.
finding the time to manage any business is always a challenge. And what we try to do within the business map was to help or provide a route map to start thinking about what's changing, how it affects, what are the risks, the pressure points, what are the possible ideas, what are others doing, and then think about using that information with regards to planning. If we were thinking about the things that out-of-school providers can do and business tips for out-of-school providers, what would your top tips be at this moment in time?
Oh, so I think, you know, the crucial thing is to be more business minded. You know, by the very nature of out of school clubs, they are caring and nurturing, and that tends to be the approach that, particularly when they're set up by sole traders and run by people who needed something for their own children after school, and so they tend to carry that caring and nurturing approach into their business decision making. And obviously, in order to be sustainable, they just can't do that. They have to make clear, clinical business decisions without emotion. So, as I say, you know, people deciding in the first lockdown to open and run at a loss, that was a great gesture for society, but not great for a club. Mm-hmm. And so I think, yes, making clear business decisions, looking at the figures and letting them decide how you proceed. So not working out your fees on the basis of how much you think parents can afford to pay, but working out your fees on how much you need to be, or what income you need to be sustainable.
Absolutely.
The other thing I'd say is don't put off making the difficult decisions, because the longer you put those off, the more money they're likely to cost you. So if you know that you're going to have to make redundancies, do it sooner rather than later. Mm-hmm. Don't wait to the point where you've got no money to fund these things and you're having to close and you're in enormous personal debt. It's better to make those decisions sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. And, you know, I have been very fortunate to be in Zoom rooms with groups of out-of-school providers, as well as out-of-school providers being part of mixed groups. And, you know, I have met lots of out-of-school providers that over the summer holidays and throughout the year have taken advantage of things. And it has been a real mix of people who have been taken advantage of furlough. Some local authorities have had funding that they've prioritised to out of school. Yeah. So a very, very, very mixed picture. Since September, out of school providers, well, since lockdown started, out of school providers have had a lot to cope with. We know that there's been a lot of change in parental demand. I've heard that firsthand. We hear it, you know, it resonates through all the feedback from the webinar as well. And we know that providers have been able to work collaboratively, and there have been many practical challenges. I mean, can you give me one example or a good example that maybe would benefit out school providers with regards to things that they've done well that have worked?
I think adaptability is the key, and those that have tried to work around the problems have found that they can make the club work successfully for both the staff and the children attending. For those clubs who they've just thought, oh, we're not allowed to do this anymore, we can't do this anymore, we can't do this anymore, that they will really struggle. You know, because if you're constantly telling children that you can't do or they can't do the things they want to do, of course they're not going to enjoy attending the club, and eventually their parents are going to, you know, give in to the pressure and make alternative arrangements. But those clubs that have adapted to particularly the bubble structure, mm-hmm. And one of the things we're aware of clubs doing, is trying to work out how children can still access all the play equipment and have free choice whilst maintaining the safety within the setting. And so they've done things like providing individual pencil cases for all the children with all the basics like glue and scissors and pens and pencils, so that they're reducing the sharing. They're rotating toys and equipment between bubbles. So, one bubble will have it one day, they'll sort of put it to one side or sanitize it, for, ready for, and then rotate things like that. So some clubs are actually saying how, in some respects, it has actually improved their practice, because children are using all of the resources that they have, rather than staff sort of selecting a small sample each day, and children mostly having access to those until they request something else. So the rotation is meaning that they're actually using all of the club's resources on a more regular basis, which children are obviously enjoying.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that everyone has learned throughout this whole process is adaptability, and sometimes taking it back to the basics like that it can be really, really refreshing, and can be quite invigorating as well. So thinking about looking ahead, we were talking earlier about vaccinations rollout. The weather hopefully is getting warmer, and we expect to emerge out of lockdown in the near, in inverted comments, future. What do you think the business priorities for the out of school wraparound sector are going to be?
Well, the most important thing is trying to build some resilience into the system. I mean, I think, the fact that some clubs were closed for 6 months with no income whatsoever means that they are running very low on reserves. And as I say, lots of clubs have just run out completely. So I don't know how we can actually achieve this yet. I think it needs a lot of thinking about, and it will involve negotiating with schools or whoever you rent your premises from, to try and negotiate lower rents for a period of while clubs build back up to profitability. But I think in the future we need to look at sustainability much more clearly, and because you just assume that everyone will need childcare. No one, I don't think even in the worst case scenario planning that clubs would have anticipated being closed for the best part of a year.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, the other thing I think we particularly need to do is try and raise the profile of the sector. We were aware at the beginning of the pandemic that those involved in the decision-making processes were not fully aware of what out-of-school childcare meant. I think they assumed that out-of-school activity clubs were in fact childcare when they're not, because they're unregulated. And they didn't really understand that out-of-school clubs or out-of-school childcare providers are regulated in the same way that nurseries and childminders and preschools are regulated. And I think that in itself is a huge challenge, because we're such a small sector of the childcare market, but absolutely essential for those parents of primary age children.
Absolutely. I mean, I was very fortunate to be chair of a preschool, and we ran an out of school club for in the village that I live in for 10 years. And, it is, that is how school age children, families of school age children get those extended and longer days.
Yeah.
It has been really interesting hearing from you. I think it has been for the sector an extremely challenging time, and moving forward, it will continue to have its challenges. But I'm hoping that there are a number of opportunities for the sector in, in engaging with things like the holiday activities and food program. The fact that children will want to be outside, the fact that families will want their children, and children will want to be engaged with each other. So being part of summer schemes and, and going to summer clubs must be a huge opportunity, both for families, for children, and for those who supply it. I'd love to carry on. We need to bring this to an end. So thank you very much for your input. If you'd like to find out more about the work that the Out of School Alliance does, then you can just Google them. They are there on the web for you to find. Thanks once again, Catherine, for your input. Thank you for coming along and watching this vodcast. There are more if you're interested, and hopefully see you on another one. Thanks very much.